The stars above Earth had always been silent. For thousands of years, humans looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They built telescopes, sent radio signals into the void, and launched probes to distant worlds. The answer finally came on a cold Tuesday morning in March, but it was not the answer anyone hoped for. A massive ship appeared in orbit around the moon. It was larger than any city on Earth, a dark metallic structure that blocked out entire constellations. Smaller vessels surrounded it like insects around a hive. The ships made no attempt to hide. They simply appeared as if announcing their presence was enough. Panic spread across the planet within hours. Television broadcasts were interrupted. Internet servers crashed from the traffic. World leaders held emergency meetings. Military forces went on high alert. Religious leaders prayed. Scientists argued. Common people stared at their screens in disbelief. The ships remained silent for 3 days, hovering in space like a knife held above the throat. Then the message came. It arrived simultaneously on every communication device on Earth. Radios crackled to life. Television screens displayed the same image. Phones buzzed with identical text. The message was translated into every human language perfectly, impossibly. This world is now claimed by the Vox Imperium. Surrender your weapons, surrender your governments, surrender your autonomy. Resistance will result in total extinction. You have 7 days to comply. The world did not know how to respond. Some nations wanted to fight immediately. Others suggested negotiation. A few thought surrender was the only logical choice. Arguments broke out in the United Nations Assembly. Military generals presented impossible scenarios. No human weapon could reach the alien ships. Nuclear missiles would be useless. Fighter jets were toys compared to the technology hovering above them. But humanity had survived countless threats before. They decided to do what they did best. They would talk first, and if talking failed, they would fight anyway. Ambassador Hyun-woo was chosen to represent Earth. He was a career diplomat from Korea, a man who had spent 30 years negotiating peace treaties and trade agreements. He was calm under pressure, intelligent, and most importantly, he understood that sometimes the best weapon was patience. He accepted the role knowing he might not return alive. The aliens agreed to meet on neutral ground. They selected an abandoned space station that humans had built decades ago and forgotten. It orbited high above Earth, a rusty cylinder that once held dreams of space exploration. Now it would hold the fate of the entire planet. Hyun-woo traveled up in a small shuttle with a team of 5 others. There was Yuna, a young diplomat who spoke 8 languages. There was Colonel Minho, a military advisor who looked uncomfortable in his formal suit instead of his uniform. There was Dr. Soman, a scientist who studied alien signals. There was General Ji-won, a decorated military leader known for her strategic mind. And there was Jay, a cultural anthropologist who studied human conflict throughout history. The shuttle docked with the old station. The airlock hissed open. The humans stepped inside, their hearts pounding. The station had been modified. The walls were now lined with strange metal. Lights glowed from sources they could not identify. The air smelled sterile and cold. They walked down a corridor that seemed to stretch forever. At the end was a large chamber. Inside, the aliens waited. The Vox Imperium delegation consisted of 7 beings. They were tall, nearly 3 meters high, with skin that looked like polished stone. Their eyes were completely black, like pools of ink. They wore armor that seemed to be part of their bodies, shifting and moving with them. At the center stood Fleet Commander Thalrex, his armor decorated with symbols of conquest. Thalrex did not sit. None of the aliens did. They stood in a semicircle, looking down at the humans. The message was clear. This was not a negotiation between equals. This was a superior power dictating terms to a primitive species. Hyun-woo stepped forward. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect but not submission. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Thalrex's voice came from everywhere at once, translated instantly into Korean. "Your gratitude is unnecessary. We meet because it is our custom to offer surrender before destruction. You are the 3047th species to stand before the Imperium. All have made the same choice. They surrendered and they survived. Those who refused are now dust orbiting dead stars." Yuna swallowed hard. Minho's jaw clenched. Soman took notes on a small tablet, her hands shaking slightly. Ji-won remained perfectly still, her face showing nothing. Hyun-woo continued, his voice steady. "We understand your power. We see your ships. We know we cannot match your technology, but we ask that you understand us as well. Humanity is not a simple species. We have a long history, one filled with both terrible mistakes and remarkable achievements. Before you make your final decision, we request that you hear our story. Thalrex tilted his head slightly, the first sign of anything resembling curiosity. Your story is irrelevant. Your history means nothing. You are primitives who have barely left your own planet. You fight among yourselves with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. You poison your own atmosphere and destroy your own ecosystems. Why should we care about the story of a species that cannot even unite its own world? General Jiwan stepped forward then. She was shorter than Hyunwoo, but she carried herself with absolute authority. Her uniform was simple, bearing only a few medals. Her hair was tied back in a tight knot. Her eyes were sharp and clear. Because, she said quietly, if you do not understand us, you will make a mistake that costs you more than you imagine. The chamber fell silent. The other aliens stirred slightly, a ripple of movement through their ranks. Thalrex stared at Jiwan for a long moment. You threaten us? His voice was cold. You who cannot even reach our ships with your weapons? Jiwan shook her head. No threat. A warning. You have conquered 3,000 worlds, but I suspect none of them were like Earth. None of them had our particular kind of insanity. We are not asking you to spare us out of mercy. We are suggesting you listen to us out of self-interest. Another alien spoke then, one with darker armor covered in strange markings. Explain this warning, human. We have destroyed species far older and more advanced than yours. What makes you different? Ji-1 glanced at Hyunwoo. He nodded slightly. This was why they had brought her. This was the plan. Give me 1 hour, Ji-1 said. Let me tell you about my planet. Let me explain what kind of species you are dealing with. If after 1 hour you still wish to demand our surrender, we will give you our answer. But I promise you, Commander Thalrex, you will want to hear what I have to say, because we are not like the other 3,000 species. We are something you have never encountered before. Thalrex was silent for a long time. The other aliens seemed to communicate without words, their bodies shifting in patterns the humans could not understand. Finally, the commander spoke. 1 hour. Then we will hear your answer, and if your answer is refusal, your species will join the others who chose extinction over wisdom. Ji-1 bowed her head slightly. 1 hour. That is all I need. The chamber reconfigured itself. Chairs rose from the floor for the humans. The aliens remained standing, but they seemed to settle into listening positions. Lights dimmed slightly. The air grew colder. Ji-1 stood at the center of the room. Behind her, images began to appear on the walls, projected from Somin's tablet. Images of Earth, images of humanity, images of war, and General Ji-1 began to speak. General Ji-1 stood in the center of the chamber, her hands clasped behind her back. The projection behind her showed Earth from space, a blue and green sphere covered in white clouds. It looked peaceful, beautiful, fragile. This is my home, Ji-1 began. 4 billion years old. For most of that time, it was covered in simple life, bacteria, plants, animals. Then about 200,000 years ago, my species appeared. We were weak. We had no claws, no thick skin, no venom. We were slower than most predators. We could not fly. We could barely swim. By all logic, we should have gone extinct. The image changed. It showed early humans, thin and vulnerable, huddled around a fire in a cave. Thalrex watched without expression. The other aliens remained perfectly still. But we had something else, Ji-1 continued. We had minds that could plan. We had hands that could make tools. And most importantly, we had something you need to understand about humanity. We had spite. When the world tried to kill us, we refused to die. When predators hunted us, we hunted them back. When the ice came and covered half the planet, we survived by eating anything we could find and wearing the skins of dead animals. We are, at our core, a species that does not know when to quit. Yuna watched the aliens carefully. One of them shifted slightly, a movement that might have been interest or might have been contempt. Colonel Minho kept his eyes on Thalrex, watching for any sign of aggression. Dr. Somin's tablet glowed softly as she recorded everything. Ji-1 continued. For most of our history, we lived in small groups, tribes, clans, villages. We fought each other constantly, over food, over land, over insults and honor and things that seem meaningless now. But these small conflicts taught us something important. They taught us how to organize, how to coordinate, how to turn individual rage into collective purpose. The projection changed again. It showed ancient armies, thousands of soldiers marching in formation, swords and shields glinting in sunlight, banners flying, drums beating. About 5,000 years ago, we created empires, kingdoms, nation-states. The conflicts grew larger, more organized, more deadly. We invented bronze, then iron, then steel. We created weapons specifically designed to kill other humans, swords, spears, bows, catapults. Every generation invented something more efficient at destruction than the last. Thalrex finally spoke. This is not unique. Every species goes through a violent phase. Most grow beyond it once they reach the stars. Your history of primitive warfare does not concern us. Jiwan smiled, but it was not a happy expression. You are right that we are primitive, but you are wrong about the warfare. Let me give you an example. There was a conflict on Earth called the 100 Years' War. Would you like to guess how long it lasted? 100 of your years, the alien with the dark armor said. 116 years, Jiwan corrected. It was fought between two kingdoms over who had the right to rule certain territories. The war killed millions. It destroyed entire regions. Famines spread. Plagues followed the armies. Children grew up knowing nothing but war, had their own children, grew old, and died. All while the war continued. And here is what you need to understand. The reason it lasted so long was not because either side could win decisively. It was because neither side would admit defeat. Even when they were starving, even when their cities burned, they kept fighting. The chamber was very quiet. Jiwan let the silence stretch for a moment before continuing, but that was small compared to what came later. Let me tell you about the World Wars. These were conflicts that consumed the entire planet. The first one began in 1914. It was supposed to be over quickly. Military leaders on both sides said their soldiers would be home by Christmas. The war lasted 4 years. 20 million people died. Empires that had stood for centuries collapsed. New weapons were invented specifically for that war. Machine guns that could kill hundreds in minutes. Poison gas that melted lungs. Artillery shells that could destroy buildings. Aircraft that dropped bombs from the sky. The projection showed trenches, mud, barbed wire. Soldiers who looked more like ghosts than men. The images were in black and white, grainy and old, but the horror was clear. The soldiers lived in holes in the ground, Jiwan said quietly. They slept in mud. Rats ate the bodies of the dead. Disease spread through the trenches. Men would go insane from the constant bombardment. And still, they kept fighting. Not because they wanted to, not because they understood why the war started, but because the men in charge ordered them to and soldiers followed orders, even when those orders meant certain death. Ambassador Hyunwoo watched Thalrex carefully. The alien commander's expression had not changed, but there was a new stillness to him. Attention. When that war finally ended, Jiwan continued, humanity swore it would never happen again. We created international organizations. We signed treaties. We promised ourselves that we had learned our lesson. 21 years later, we started an even bigger war. The projection changed. Images of cities on fire, massive armies, tanks rolling across fields, ships exploding in the ocean, aircraft falling from the sky trailing smoke. The Second World War killed between 70 and 85 million people, Jiwan said. We are not certain of the exact number because so many died that we lost count. Entire families were erased. Cities were bombed until nothing remained but rubble. We invented new ways to kill each other. Rockets, jet aircraft. And at the end of that war, we created something that changed everything. She paused. The projection showed a mushroom cloud rising over a city. The image was terrible and beautiful at the same time, a monument to human ingenuity and human horror. We split the atom, Jiwan said. We learned how to break apart the basic building blocks of matter and release the energy inside. We used this knowledge to create bombs. We dropped 2 of them on cities. The first one killed 80,000 people instantly. The second killed 40,000. The heat was so intense that people were vaporized, leaving only their shadows burned into walls. The radiation poisoned the survivors for years afterward. One of the aliens made a sound, a clicking noise that the translator could not interpret. Thalrex raised a hand, and the alien fell silent. "You are wondering why I tell you this," Jiwan said. "You are thinking that this proves we are a violent, primitive species that needs to be controlled. But you are missing the important part. The war ended. We rebuilt. The nations that had been enemies became allies. The cities that were destroyed were rebuilt, bigger and better than before. And we continued to make nuclear weapons. The projection showed missiles in silos, submarines, bombers, thousands of warheads pointed at the sky. At the height of what we called the Cold War," Jiwan said, "humanity possessed enough nuclear weapons to destroy our own planet several times over. 2 nations stood on opposite sides, each with the power to end civilization in less than an hour. They hated each other. They feared each other. They prepared for war every single day for 46 years. And here is the most important part, Commander Thalrex. They never used the weapons." Thalrex leaned forward slightly. "Why not?" "Because," Jiwan said, "we invented something called mutually assured destruction. It meant that if one side launched their weapons, the other side would launch theirs, and everyone would die. Not just the soldiers, not just the leaders. Everyone. Every city would burn. Every farm would be poisoned. Every child would die. We stared at the end of our own world for nearly 50 years, and we chose not to pull the trigger." She paused again, letting the words sink in. "But the weapons are still there. We still have them. Thousands of them. We have never forgotten how to make them. And if you invade Earth, if you threaten our cities, if you try to conquer us, every nation on our planet will unite for the first time in history. And we will use every weapon we have, including the ones that can crack continents and poison atmospheres for centuries." The chamber was completely silent now. Even the hum of the machinery seemed to have stopped. The aliens stared at Jiwan with their black, emotionless eyes. "You said we fight with chemical explosives and metal projectiles," Jiwan said softly. "That is true. But we fight with those things because we choose to. Because we made rules. We signed treaties saying we would not use chemical weapons, biological weapons, or nuclear weapons against each other. We created laws of war. And then, throughout history, we have broken those laws whenever we decided the cause was important enough. We are a species that makes rules and breaks them, that builds civilizations and burns them down, that reaches for peace with one hand while holding a knife in the other." She stepped closer to Thalrex, close enough that the size difference was obvious. She had to tilt her head back to look at him. "So I ask you, Commander, are you sure you want to fight us?" Thalrex stared at General Jiwan for a long moment. The other aliens shifted uncomfortably. The silence in the chamber felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Finally, the commander spoke. "You threaten us with suicide," he said. "You admit that using these weapons would destroy your own planet. You would kill yourselves just to hurt us. This is not strategy. This is insanity." Jiwan nodded slowly. "Yes, it is insanity. That is exactly what I am trying to explain to you. Humanity is insane. We have always been insane. And that insanity is what makes us dangerous." She turned away from him and walked back to the center of the chamber. The projection changed again, showing images of Earth throughout history. Battles, wars, destruction, but also rebuilding. Always rebuilding. "Let me tell you another story," Jiwan said. "In the year 1945, after we dropped the atomic bombs after millions had died, we thought we had learned our lesson. We created the United Nations. We wrote declarations of human rights. We swore we would solve our problems with words instead of weapons. Within 5 years, we were fighting another war, then another, then another. In the past 80 years, Earth has not seen a single day of complete peace. Somewhere on the planet, at every moment, humans are killing other humans. Colonel Minho watched the aliens carefully. He had fought in 3 different conflicts himself. He knew the truth of Ji-won's words. War was not something humanity did occasionally. It was something they did constantly. But here is what you need to understand, Ji-won continued. We do not fight because we are controlled by instinct like animals. We do not fight because we are too primitive to know better. We fight because we choose to. We understand the cost. We see the bodies. We bury the dead. We comfort the survivors. And then we pick up our weapons and fight again. Ambassador Hyun-woo had seen this presentation before. He had helped Ji-won prepare it. But hearing it again, in this place in front of these aliens who held the fate of Earth in their hands, the words felt different, heavier, more true. Let me give you a specific example, Ji-won said. There was a battle during the Second World War called Stalingrad. 2 armies fought over a single city for 5 months. The fighting was so intense that soldiers measured progress in meters, not kilometers. They fought for individual buildings, individual rooms, individual staircases. The winter came. Temperatures dropped to -40 degrees. Soldiers froze to death in their positions. They ate rats and boiled leather boots to survive. Over 1 million people died in that one city. The projection showed the ruins of Stalingrad. Buildings reduced to skeletons, snow covering everything, bodies frozen in the streets. The logical thing would have been for one side to retreat, Ji-won said. To save their soldiers, to fight another day in a better position. But neither side retreated. They fought until the city was completely destroyed, until there was nothing left worth fighting for. And when it was over, the survivors looked at the ruins and said it was worth it. They said they had won. Yuna spoke for the first time then. Her voice was soft but clear. Commander Thalrex, may I add something? The alien turned his black eyes toward her. Speak. I am a diplomat, Yuna said. I have spent my entire career studying conflicts and trying to prevent them. I have read thousands of pages of history. I have interviewed veterans from a dozen different wars. And I have learned something that terrifies me. Humans do not hate war. We say we do. We talk about peace. We build monuments to the dead and promise to remember. But deep down, somewhere in our minds, we find meaning in conflict. We write songs about battles. We tell stories about warriors. We give medals to soldiers and call them heroes. War is woven into our culture so deeply that we cannot separate it from who we are. She paused, looking down at her hands. When I was a child, my grandmother told me about the occupation of Korea. Foreign soldiers controlled our country. They took our resources, they tried to erase our language and culture. My grandmother was just a girl then. She should have been in school, learning to read and write. Instead, she learned how to hide food from soldiers, how to recognize the sound of different aircraft, how to run when the bombs started falling. And when I asked her how she survived, do you know what she said? The aliens waited. Even Thalrex seemed interested now. She said she survived because she refused to give up. Yuna continued. Because even as a child, she knew that if she gave up, if her family gave up, if her country gave up, then the invaders would win. And that was unacceptable. Not because of logic, not because of strategy, but because of spite. Because humans would rather die fighting than live under someone else's control. Dr. Soman stood up then. She had been quiet until now, taking notes, recording everything, but she had something to add. I am a scientist, Soman said. I study probabilities and patterns. Before this meeting, I ran calculations. I wanted to know what would happen if the Vox Imperium invaded Earth. The numbers are not in our favor. Your technology is superior. Your weapons are more advanced. You could destroy our military forces in less than a week. You could bomb our cities from orbit. You could make us surrender through force. She adjusted her glasses, a nervous habit. But then I calculated what would happen after the surrender. Humans do not accept occupation well. Throughout our history, every time one group has conquered another, resistance movements have formed. Guerrilla fighters, partisans, insurgents. They hide among civilians. They strike at supply lines. They ambush patrols. They make occupation so costly, so bloody, so exhausting, that eventually the occupiers leave. The projection changed to show historical examples. Vietnam, Afghanistan. Dozens of smaller conflicts where technologically superior forces had been worn down by determined resistance. You would win the war, Somin said quietly. But you would never have peace. You would have to station soldiers on Earth forever. You would have to guard every building, every road, every bridge, and humans would kill those soldiers. Not all at once, not in big battles, but slowly, steadily. One soldier at a time, one patrol at a time, for years, for decades, for generations if necessary, because that is what we do. We endure, we outlast, we make our enemies regret ever finding us. Thalrex was silent for a long time. The other aliens seemed to be communicating without words again, their bodies moving in subtle patterns. Finally, one of them spoke, the one with the decorated armor. You paint yourselves as monsters, the alien said. You describe a species that chooses violence over peace, that prefers death to surrender. Why should we let such a dangerous species survive? Perhaps the galaxy would be safer if humanity was extinct. General Jiwan had been waiting for this question. She smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. Because we are already here, she said. Because we have already split the atom. We have already reached our moon. We have already sent probes to other planets. In another 50 years, maybe less, we will have ships that can travel to other stars. And when we get there, we will bring everything I have told you today with us. Our violence, our stubbornness, our refusal to quit. You can destroy us now. Kill all 8 billion of us, turn Earth into a dead rock. But the galaxy will know that the Vox Imperium committed genocide. Other species will hear the story. They will wonder if they are next. They will unite against you, and they will be right to fear you. She stepped closer to Thalrex again. Or you can leave us alone. Mark our system as restricted space. Tell your empire that Earth is not worth the cost. Let us develop on our own. Maybe in a few hundred years we will be ready to join the galactic community. Maybe we will learn to be less violent. Maybe we will grow up. Or maybe we will stay exactly as we are. Dangerous. Unpredictable. Insane. But alive. Jay, the cultural anthropologist, spoke up from where he had been standing quietly. Commander, in all your conquests, have you ever encountered a species that chose extinction over surrender? Thalrex turned to look at him. No. Then you do not understand what you are facing, Jay said. Throughout human history, there have been groups that chose to die rather than submit. There was a fortress called Masada, where nearly 1,000 people killed themselves rather than be captured by an invading army. There were soldiers who charged machine guns knowing they would die. There were pilots who flew their aircraft into enemy ships because they had run out of ammunition. Humans have a concept we call martyrdom, the idea that dying for a cause makes the cause sacred, makes it worth remembering, worth continuing. He gestured at the projection which now showed Earth again, beautiful and blue. If you invade us, some of us will become martyrs. Our deaths will inspire others. Our sacrifice will be remembered. Songs will be written, stories will be told, and 100 years from now humans will still be fighting you, still be resisting, still be making you pay for every inch of ground. Because that is who we are. That is what we do. The chamber fell silent again. General G1 looked at each of the aliens in turn, then focused on Thalrex. You asked if we threaten you, she said softly. No, we warn you. We tell you the truth. We are not like the other 3,000 species you have conquered. We are something else, something that does not fit into your calculations, something unpredictable. So I ask you again, Commander, is Earth really worth the cost? Thalrex turned away from the humans. He walked to the far end of the chamber where the other aliens stood. They gathered in a tight circle, their bodies touching, creating a wall that blocked the humans from seeing or hearing them. The silence stretched on. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Colonel Minho shifted his weight slightly. His hand moved unconsciously toward his hip, where his sidearm would normally rest. But they had come unarmed. It was a condition of the meeting. Now standing in this cold chamber surrounded by aliens who could kill them with a thought, he wondered if that had been a mistake. Ambassador Hyunwoo remained calm. He had been in tense negotiations before, though never with the fate of the entire world hanging in the balance. He watched the aliens carefully, trying to read their body language, looking for any clue about what they were thinking. But their movements were too alien, too different from anything human. He could not tell if they were angry or afraid or simply indifferent. Yuna looked at General Ji-Wan. The general stood with her hands behind her back, her face composed, but Yuna could see the tension in her shoulders. This entire plan rested on a single assumption, that the Vox Imperium valued efficiency, that they calculated costs and benefits, that they would choose the easier path if given a good reason. But what if they were wrong? What if the aliens did not care about costs? What if they simply wanted to punish humanity for its defiance? Dr. Somin's tablet chimed softly. She glanced at it and her eyes widened. She showed it to Hyunwoo. A message had come through from Earth. Military forces worldwide had gone to full alert. Nuclear submarines had left their ports. Missile silos were armed and ready. Fighter jets were in the air. If the humans in this chamber did not return safely, if the aliens made any hostile move, Earth would launch everything it had. It would be suicide, but it would also be revenge. The aliens could destroy humanity, but they would pay a terrible price. Their ships would burn, their soldiers would die, and the rest of the galaxy would see that the Vox Imperium was not invincible, that they could bleed. Hyunwoo deleted the message without responding. There was nothing to say. Earth had made its choice. Now they could only wait. Finally, the circle of aliens broke apart. Thalrex turned back to face the humans. His expression was still unreadable, those black eyes showing nothing. He walked slowly across the chamber until he stood directly in front of General Ji-Wan. "You have given us much to consider," he said. His voice was quieter now, less commanding, almost thoughtful. "The Vox Imperium has existed for 12,000 of your years. We have brought order to 3,000 star systems. We have ended countless wars. We have eliminated suffering. We have created peace through strength." He paused, looking at each human in turn. But that peace required submission. Every species we encountered understood this eventually. Some resisted at first. Some fought back. But they all surrendered in the end because they understood that survival was more important than pride, that peace was more valuable than independence. Ji-Wan said nothing. She simply waited. "Your species is different," Thalrex continued. "We have studied your broadcasts. We have analyzed your history. We thought we understood you. We thought you were primitive, divided, easy to conquer. But listening to you today, I realize we were wrong. You are not primitive. You are dangerous. Not because of your weapons, not because of your technology, but because of what you are willing to sacrifice." One of the other aliens stepped forward. It was the one with the dark armor covered in strange markings. "I am War Master Vex. I have led campaigns against 47 different species. I have seen resistance movements. I have crushed rebellions. I have dealt with guerrilla fighters and insurgents. But I have never encountered a species that builds weapons capable of destroying their own world and then chooses not to, use them out of pure spite." He gestured at the projection, still showing Earth. "Your Cold War fascinates me. Two sides with the power to end civilization, staring at each other for nearly 50 years. The discipline that required, the control, and yet you call yourselves insane. You describe yourselves as violent and unpredictable, but what I see is a species with incredible restraint. You could have ended everything at any moment, but you chose not to." General Ji-Wan felt a chill run down her spine. This was not the response she had expected. She had tried to paint humanity as too dangerous to conquer. But Vex seemed to see something else. "Something that might be worse. You want to know what I think?" Vex said. "I think you are more like us than you realize. The Vox Imperium was not always an empire. 12,000 years ago, we were like you, divided, fighting among ourselves. We nearly destroyed our own homeworld. But we survived. We learned, we united, and we swore that we would bring the order we had achieved to the rest of the galaxy." He moved closer to the humans. "You stand at a crossroads. You can continue on your current path. Continue fighting among yourselves. Continue building weapons you are afraid to use. Continue poisoning your planet and wondering if each generation will be the last. Or you can join us. Submit to the Imperium. Let us guide you. Let us help you become what you could be." Jay, the anthropologist, shook his head. "You do not understand. Humanity will never willingly submit. It is not in our nature. You would have to break us completely. Destroy everything we are before we would accept your rule. And if you break us that thoroughly, what would be left? Not the species you think you see potential in, just broken remnants pretending to be human. Another alien spoke, one that had been silent until now. Its armor was silver, polished to a mirror shine. I am Science Director Kell. I have studied the development of intelligent species for 3,000 years. Every species follows certain patterns. They develop tools. They form societies. They reach for the stars. But they all require guidance. Left alone, species destroy themselves. Nuclear war, biological weapons, artificial intelligence gone wrong, environmental collapse. The paths to extinction are numerous. The Imperium prevents these outcomes. We save species from themselves. Dr. Soman stepped forward then. With respect, Director, you prevent those outcomes by removing choice. You save species by making them into something else, something compliant, something controlled. But what if the struggle is important? What if the risk of failure is what makes success meaningful? Kell tilted his head, a gesture that seemed almost human. An interesting philosophy. But tell me, scientist, what happens when you fail? What happens when humanity pushes too far and destroys itself? Will your philosophy comfort the last survivors as they watch their world burn? Maybe not, Soman admitted. But at least we will have been free to make our own mistakes. Free to learn from them or die from them. That choice, that freedom is what makes us human. Thalrex raised his hand, silencing the other aliens. Enough, we have heard the human arguments. We have considered their warnings. Now we must make a decision. He turned back to Ambassador Hyunwoo. You came here to negotiate. You brought your general to frighten us with stories of human violence. You painted your species as too dangerous to conquer, too stubborn to control. And you succeeded. We are convinced humanity is indeed dangerous. Hyunwoo felt his heart sink. This was it. They had failed. The aliens would see humanity as a threat that needed to be eliminated. He glanced at Jiwon, but her face showed nothing. She had known this might happen. They all had. But, Thalrex continued, and that single word changed everything. War Master Vex has convinced me that invasion would be costly. Science Director Kell has calculated that occupation would be impossible, and I have decided that the Vox Imperium has better uses for our resources than spending centuries fighting a species that refuses to die. He stepped back, creating distance between himself and the humans. Therefore, I am declaring Earth and your solar system a restricted zone. No Imperial ships will enter your space. No conquest will be attempted. You will be left alone to develop as you will, to destroy yourselves or save yourselves. The choice will be yours. The humans stared at him in shock. It took a moment for the words to sink in. They had won, not through superior force, not through clever tactics, but by being exactly what they were: dangerous, unpredictable, more trouble than they were worth. However, Thalrex said, his voice growing harder, understand this. You are being given a chance. A single chance. If humanity develops faster than light travel, if you leave your solar system, if you spread into the galaxy, you will be subject to Imperial law. You will have to choose then. Join us willingly or face the consequences. This isolation is temporary. Eventually, you will have to decide what kind of species you want to be. Ambassador Hyunwoo found his voice. How long do we have? As long as it takes you to reach the stars on your own, Thalrex said. If you manage it in 50 years, then you have 50 years. If it takes 500, then you have 500. But know this. The galaxy is not empty. There are threats out here that make the Vox Imperium look gentle. There are species that would not negotiate with you as we have, that would not listen to your warnings, that would see a divided primitive world and simply take it. He gestured at the walls of the chamber. Space is vast and cold and full of things that want to kill you. The Imperium brings order, protection, peace. But if you refuse our offer now, if you choose independence, the human delegation stood in silence for a long moment after the aliens left. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It felt like they were waiting for something else to happen, for the other shoe to drop, for this to be revealed as some kind of trick. But the chamber remained empty except for them. The cold metal walls seemed less threatening now. The strange lights less ominous. Colonel Minho was the first to break the silence. Did we just win? Ambassador Hyunwoo let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. I think we did. I think we actually did. Yuna sat down suddenly, her legs giving out. She had been standing rigid for over an hour. every muscle tense, and now that the danger had passed, her body could not hold her up anymore. She looked at her hands and saw they were shaking. We could have died. They could have killed us all. Killed everyone on Earth. Dr. Soman put a hand on her shoulder. But they did not. General Jiwan's plan worked. We convinced them we were not worth the trouble. Jiwan herself stood apart from the others, staring at the spot where Thalrex had stood. Her expression was thoughtful, almost troubled. Jay noticed and walked over to her. "What is wrong?" he asked quietly. "We survived. Earth is safe. For now," Jiwan said. "Did you hear what Vex said at the end? About other threats in the galaxy? About us facing them alone? He was trying to scare us. Trying to make us regret our choice." Jiwan shook her head. "No, I do not think so. I think he was telling the truth. Think about it. The Vox Imperium controls 3,000 systems. That is a lot. But space is infinite. There must be other powers out there. Other empires. Other dangers. And now those dangers know we exist. Know we are alone. Know we are vulnerable." Hyunwoo had been listening. He came over and stood beside them. "She is right. We did not win the war today. We just delayed it. Bought ourselves time. Maybe a few decades. Maybe a century if we are lucky. But eventually, we will have to face what is out there. And when we do, we will need to be ready." The shuttle ride back to Earth was quiet. Each person was lost in their own thoughts. Minho kept replaying the meeting in his mind, analyzing every word, every gesture, looking for things he had missed. Yuna stared out the window at the stars, wondering which ones held hostile civilizations. Salman worked on her tablet, already writing a report about what had happened. Jay thought about all the human history he had studied, all the conflicts and wars and struggles, and wondered if any of it had prepared them for what was coming. General Ji-Wan looked at Earth growing larger in the window. From space it looked so peaceful. The cities were invisible. The borders were invisible. All the things humans fought over seemed meaningless from up here. Just one small blue world spinning in the darkness, and now that world knew it was not alone. Knew it was not safe. Knew that the universe was full of dangers they could barely imagine. When they landed, the world was waiting for them. News cameras, government officials, military commanders, scientists, religious leaders. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. What the aliens had said, whether humanity had survived. Hyunwoo stepped out of the shuttle first. The cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust toward him. Questions came from every direction. He raised his hand for silence, and the crowd gradually quieted. "The Vox Imperium has agreed to leave Earth alone," he said simply. "Our solar system has been declared a restricted zone. No alien forces will enter our space. We remain independent and free." The crowd erupted. Some people cheered. Some people cried. Some people fell to their knees in relief. It took several minutes before order could be restored. When the noise finally died down, a reporter shouted a question. "What did you say to them? How did you convince them?" Hyunwoo glanced at General Ji-Wan. She stepped forward and took the microphone. "We told them the truth. We told them who we are, what we are capable of. We showed them that humanity is not an easy target, that conquering us would cost more than it was worth. And they listened." Another reporter called out, "Does this mean we are at peace? Is the threat over?" Ji-Wan's expression darkened. "No, the threat is not over. It has only changed. The Vox Imperium has left us alone, but there are other powers in the galaxy. Other empires. Other dangers. We have been given time, but that time is limited. We need to use it wisely." "What do you mean?" someone asked. "What should we do?" Ji-Wan looked directly at the cameras, knowing that the whole world was watching. "We need to stop fighting each other. We need to work together. For the first time in human history, we face a threat that does not care about our borders, our religions, our politics. The aliens do not care if you are from the east or the west, if you are rich or poor, if you speak one language or another. To them, we are all just humans. And if we want to survive, we need to start seeing ourselves that way too." The crowd fell silent. People looked at each other. Some nodded. Some frowned. Some just looked afraid. In the days that followed, the world tried to process what had happened. The United Nations held emergency sessions. World leaders gave speeches. Scientists analyzed every piece of data from the encounter. Military forces remained on high alert, watching the skies, waiting to see if the aliens would return. But slowly, things began to change. Countries that had been enemies for decades started talking to each other. Weapons programs were repurposed for space exploration. Resources that had been spent on military conflicts were redirected to science and technology. It was not perfect. There were still arguments and disagreements. Old hatreds did not disappear overnight. But there was a new understanding. A new awareness that humanity was small and vulnerable and alone. General Jiwan returned to her office 2 weeks after the encounter. Her desk was covered with reports and requests. Every nation wanted her advice. Every military wanted her insights. She had become famous overnight, the woman who had stared down an alien empire and won. But she did not feel like a winner. She felt like someone who had just postponed the inevitable. She opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were documents she had not shown anyone. Intelligence reports, astronomical data, mathematical projections. All of it pointed to the same conclusion. Humanity had maybe 50 years before someone else found them. Maybe less. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Ambassador Hyunwoo entered, carrying a briefcase. "I hope I am not disturbing you." "Not at all. Please sit." He sat across from her and opened the briefcase. "I have been asked to assemble a team, a committee to coordinate Earth's response to the alien threat. They want you to lead it." Jiwan looked at the papers he spread across her desk. Budgets, personnel lists, facility locations. It was a massive undertaking. "This is bigger than anything we have attempted before." "It needs to be," Hyunwoo said. "We are trying to unite a planet. We are trying to prepare for threats we do not even understand yet. It will not be easy." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Jiwan said quietly. She looked at the papers again, then at Hyunwoo. "Will it be enough? All of this preparation, all of this effort, will it actually make a difference when the next threat arrives?" Hyunwoo was quiet for a moment. "I do not know. Maybe yes, maybe no. But I know that doing nothing guarantees failure. At least this way we have a chance," Jiwan nodded slowly. "A chance. That is all we have ever had, really. A chance to survive, a chance to prove ourselves, a chance to become something better than we are." She picked up a pen and signed the first document. "All right. I will do it. I will lead this effort. But I want one thing understood from the beginning." "What is that?" "We do not lie to people. We do not sugarcoat the danger. We tell them the truth. That space is hostile, that threats are coming, that we might fail despite our best efforts. Humanity deserves to know what we are facing." "Agreed," Hyunwoo said. "The age of comfortable lies is over." 6 months later, the first unified Earth Space Defense Force was established. Personnel from 40 different nations trained together, worked together, planned together. Old rivals learned to trust each other. Old enemies became allies. It was messy and difficult and sometimes seemed impossible. But slowly, gradually, humanity began to move in the same direction. General Ji-won stood on the observation deck of the first space station, dedicated entirely to defense. It was small, barely more than a prototype, but it represented something important: hope, purpose, unity. Yuna joined her at the window. The young diplomat had been promoted, given a key role in the new organization. "Do you think we can do it?" she asked. "Do you think we can really be ready when they come back?" Ji-won watched Earth turning slowly below them, beautiful and fragile and worth everything. "I think we will try. And if humanity has proven anything throughout history, it is that we are very good at surviving. We endure, we adapt. We fight when we have to and build when we can. The aliens thought they understood us, but I do not think they really do." "Not completely." "What do you mean?" "They saw our violence, our stubbornness, our willingness to die rather than submit. But they missed something important. They missed our ability to change, to grow, to become better than we were. Yes, we fight wars. Yes, we make terrible mistakes. But we also learn from them. We remember. And we try to do better next time." She turned away from the window and looked at Yuna. The